For 30 days, nothing changes in the salary. No raise, no external help, no stroke of luck. What changes is simple, and precisely because of that, powerful, daily attitudes. Most poor people believe the problem is earning little, but Kiyosaki explains that the true root of poverty is not in the amount that enters the account, but rather in the automatic behavior that repeats every day. Wake up, work, spend, complain, and repeat. Without realizing it, this cycle shapes the entire life. When a person decides to change what they do for just 30 days, how they think, how they react, how they use money, and even how they talk about it, something begins to reorganize inside. The mind starts to see options where before only limits existed. Small daily decisions, almost invisible, begin to create a cumulative effect. It's not about becoming rich in a month. It's about breaking a mental pattern that kept the person trapped for years. Poverty, from this point of view, is not a lack of money. It's a habit that repeats every day without being questioned. Here arises a very common mistake, believing that earning more money solves everything. Many people think this way: when I earn more, my life changes. But Kiyosaki warns that if the mind remains the same, the extra money disappears as quickly as it arrived. Thinking like a poor person doesn't mean not having money. It means using money without direction. It's spending to relieve emotions, to impress others, or simply because a little was left over. This pattern causes any increase in income to be absorbed by consumption, leaving nothing for the future. Thinking like a rich person is different. The person begins to ask themselves before spending, does this bring me closer to or farther from financial freedom? Will this money work for me, or will it just go away? At this point in the story, money stops being the final objective and becomes a tool. The rich mind understands that it doesn't matter how much comes in today, but what is being built with that amount over time. That's why many people who earn little manage to grow, while others, even earning a lot, remain stuck. The difference isn't in the pocket. It's in the way of thinking before using each reel. There comes a moment when the person realizes something uncomfortable but liberating. The financial life they have today didn't fall from the sky. It was built, decision by decision. Kiyosaki explains that while someone blames the government, the boss, the economy, or the lack of opportunities, that person hands over control of their own life to external factors. It's like sitting in the passenger seat and complaining about the road without ever touching the steering wheel. Taking self-responsibility doesn't mean blaming yourself. It means stopping deceiving yourself. It's looking at your own financial history and admitting, I made choices that brought me here, and if I chose before, I can choose differently now. This is a silent turning point. The person stops waiting for rescues and starts seeking solutions. Instead of asking, why does this happen to me? They start asking, what can I do with what I have now? When someone takes this stance for 30 consecutive days, something changes internally. The feeling of victimhood begins to disappear, and in its place emerges a new clarity, that the financial future doesn't depend on luck, but on conscious decisions repeated every day. If this content is making sense to you, leave your like now. This shows YouTube that this video is worth being delivered to more people who also need to hear this message. And besides, your like helps the channel a lot to continue bringing content like this. Now, follow me, because the next point can change the way you see your money every day. After the person stops blaming others and takes control, something new emerges: financial awareness. It's when they begin to observe themselves more carefully, almost as if they were looking at themselves from the outside. At this moment, it becomes clear that the problem is rarely the lack of money. The real problem is the lack of direction. Money comes in, but it doesn't have a defined path, so it simply slips through the fingers. Small expenses, automatic decisions, and repeated habits consume everything, leaving no trace. Kiyosaki shows that most financial difficulties are born from unconsciousness. The person doesn't know how much they truly earn, how much they spend, or why they spend. They live on autopilot, reacting to bills that arrive without ever planning the next step. When someone decides to develop financial awareness for 30 days, they begin to see patterns that were previously hidden. They notice where they overdo it, where they sabotage themselves, and where they can improve. It's not about depriving yourself of everything, but about understanding your own behavior. And when you understand your money's path, you begin to realize that it can be directed and not just lost. At this point in the journey, something happens that many avoid, but that makes all the difference. Looking at your own expenses without lying to yourself. Recording each expense seems like something small, almost irrelevant. A coffee here, a snack there, a forgotten subscription. But Kiyosaki shows that it's precisely these details that build or destroy a financial life. Money rarely disappears all at once. It goes away little by little. When the person starts to write everything down, something curious happens. For the first time, they see money in motion. It's no longer a vague feeling of, "I don't know where it went." Now there is clarity. And clarity brings power. This habit creates a silent shock. The person realizes how much effort was necessary to earn that money, and how it was spent almost without noticing. Not to generate guilt, but to generate awareness. After a few days doing this, decisions begin to change naturally. Unnecessary expenses become evident, priorities reorganize, and money, which seemed like an enemy before, begins to behave like an ally. Recording expenses for 30 days doesn't make anyone rich alone, but it changes the relationship with money. And that changes everything. After understanding where money goes, an inevitable question arises. How can I do better? This is where daily study comes in. Kiyosaki makes it clear that you don't need to become an expert or spend hours studying, just a few minutes a day, consistently. The problem is that most people never learned anything about money and continue living like that. While many use their free time only for distraction, those who decide to study finances begin to see a world that was always there, but was invisible. Concepts like assets, liabilities, income, and cash flow begin to make sense. And when something makes sense, fear decreases. This study changes the way of thinking. The person begins to realize that rich people aren't more intelligent, they just learned rules that nobody taught in school. Simple but powerful rules that work when applied with discipline. Over 30 days, this small daily habit shapes a new mentality. The person stops reacting to money and begins to anticipate decisions. Knowledge becomes protection, and gradually, financial ignorance stops controlling life. Here, a silent but powerful change happens. The person realizes they don't need to spend everything they earn to prove value, status, or success. They begin to understand that financial freedom doesn't come from earning a lot, but from retaining a part of what comes in. Living below your income isn't going through hardship. It's making conscious choices. It's resisting the immediate impulse to protect the future. While many increase expenses whenever they earn a little more, those who think differently create a margin of safety. Separating a percentage, even a small one, generates discipline. And discipline, over time, becomes freedom. The person stops living on the edge, always afraid of the next unexpected event. They begin to breathe more calmly, because now there is control. Kiyosaki teaches that those who live on the edge work only to pay bills. Those who live below their income begin to build options. Each amount saved represents less dependence and more autonomy. After 30 days practicing this, something changes in the mind. The person begins to realize they are not a slave to money. They begin to command. And this feeling of control is the first step toward a more solid financial life. At this point, the person understands that saving money is important, but it's not enough. Idle money loses strength over time. This is where the habit of investing comes in, not as a rare event, but as a routine. Kiyosaki reinforces that it's not the amount that matters in the beginning, but the consistency. Even small amounts, when invested regularly, begin to change the person's relationship with money. They stop being just someone who consumes and become someone who builds. Investing with routine transforms the role of money. It stops being just something that comes in and goes out and begins to work in silence. The person begins to think long-term, understanding that solid results are built gradually, with patience and discipline. During these 30 days, the most important thing is not immediate profit, but internal change. The beginning investor learns to respect the process, to control anxiety, and to see money as a strategic ally. This simple habit creates something rare: vision of the future. And those who develop this vision rarely go back to living only for the present. As the person begins to change, something curious happens. The voices around become louder. Opinions, criticisms disguised as advice, comments that seem harmless but carry fear and conformism. Kiyosaki explains that those who think small often try to pull others to the same place, not out of malice, but because changes make people uncomfortable. When someone decides to grow, they end up reminding others of everything they gave up. Silencing negative voices doesn't mean isolating yourself from the world. It means carefully choosing what enters the mind. Conversations based only on complaining, scarcity, and impossibility gradually undermine any attempt at evolution. During these 30 days, the person learns to filter environments, content, and even automatic thoughts. They begin to seek references that encourage learning, discipline, and long-term vision. Gradually, fear loses space. This external silence creates a powerful internal space. It's in it that new ideas can grow, and when the mind is protected, actions become firmer and more consistent. After 30 days practicing all this, something profound happens. The person realizes that the greatest limit was never the salary, the government, or the economy. The limit was always in the way they saw money and possibilities. The poor mentality consumes everything earned because it believes there will always be lack. It lives in fear of tomorrow and tries to compensate for it now. The abundance mentality works differently. It understands that each gain, however small, can become a lever for something greater. With this new vision, money stops being an end and becomes a means. The person begins to think about how to multiply, protect, and direct resources, not out of greed, but for freedom, for choice, for tranquility. Kiyosaki makes it clear, 30 days don't change everything on the outside, but they completely change what happens inside. And when the mind changes, decisions change. And when decisions change, financial life never follows the same path again. Those who go through this process rarely go back to the old pattern, because now they understand that wealth doesn't begin in the pocket. It begins in the mind, with simple choices repeated every day. If you've made it this far, it's because this message didn't pass you by. Maybe something made sense. Maybe an idea has been hammering there in your head. And that's exactly how all change begins, with a different thought. These 30 days aren't about becoming another person overnight. They're about stopping repeating the same mistakes, expecting different results. They're about taking control, even starting small. If this content helped you see money in a different way, leave your like now. This helps the video reach more people who also need to hear this message. And subscribe to the channel, because here we talk about money, mentality, and freedom. Without illusion, without false shortcuts. Now tell me, if 30 days can change the way you think, imagine what could happen to your life in a year. There's something almost no one notices when this change begins. The invisible effect. Nothing explodes, nothing draws attention, nobody applauds. On the outside, life seems the same. But inside, something is no longer the same. After 30 days, the person begins to act differently without conscious effort. They think before spending. They question before complaining. They analyze before deciding. What before required willpower has now become a pattern. This is the true power of the process. It's not the accumulated money, it's the identity built. The person stops seeing themselves as someone who always struggles to survive and begins to see themselves as someone who builds step by step. Kiyosaki teaches that lasting wealth isn't born from great isolated decisions, but from small daily commitments maintained in silence. Those who endure 30 days create a foundation for 60. Those who sustain 60 no longer accept going back to the starting point, and it's at this moment that financial life truly begins to change. Because now it no longer depends on motivation, it depends on who the person has become. There's a silent difference between those who truly change their lives and those who only consume content. Commitment to action. It's not enthusiasm, it's not motivation, it's decision. After hearing all this, many people agree, nod their heads, and continue life exactly the same. But there are those who do something simple. They choose a single behavior to apply immediately. Not 10, not everything at once, just one. It could be writing down expenses, it could be studying a few minutes a day, it could be saving a small amount. What matters is not the size of the action, but the fact that it's done every day without negotiation. Kiyosaki teaches that the brain learns through repetition. When you repeat an action for a few consecutive days, it begins to stop being effort and becomes a pattern. And when it becomes a pattern, it begins to work for you. This commitment creates an invisible line. On one side are those who know what needs to be done. On the other, those who actually do it. And this line, almost imperceptible at the beginning, is the same one that separates stagnation from growth over the years. Change doesn't begin when everything improves. It begins when someone decides to act even with doubts, even small, even now. There's a specific moment in this 30-day journey that almost no one notices when it happens. It has no marked date, but it arrives. It's the day when scarcity stops commanding. Before, any unexpected event caused fear. Any expense outside the plan became anxiety. The mind was always on alert, as if money were going to run out at any moment. This constant state of worry made the person make bad, quick, and emotional decisions. But gradually, with new habits, something changes. The person begins to think more calmly. They analyze options. They don't panic. They realize they now have information, control, and choices. Scarcity still exists in the environment, but it no longer dominates the mind. Kiyosaki explains that financial decisions made in fear almost always cost dearly. Decisions made with clarity tend to protect the future. When the mind exits survival mode, it enters construction mode. This is a watershed, because the person begins to understand that wealth is not just accumulating money, but gaining tranquility to decide better. And those who learn to decide better inevitably build more. From this point on, growth stops being an accident. It becomes a consequence. In the beginning, money is emotional for almost everyone. It brings anxiety, fear, momentary relief, or frustration. Many financial decisions aren't rational. They're reactions to feelings accumulated throughout life. During these 30 days, something begins to change silently. The person begins to notice when they're about to spend on impulse, not out of necessity. They begin to identify emotions hidden behind simple choices: tiredness, comparison, the desire to compensate for a difficult day. Kiyosaki teaches that financially intelligent people learn to separate emotion from decision. They don't use money to patch momentary voids. They use money as a construction tool. When this turn happens, money loses the power to control mood. It stops being an immediate relief and becomes a strategic resource. The person no longer feels hostage to their own emotions when they open their wallet or banking app. This is a decisive step, Because when money stops being emotional, decisions become clearer, mistakes decrease, and growth becomes predictable. From there, financial life stops being a roller coaster and begins to follow a path. There's a moment when the person realizes something simple but transformative. They no longer act as before. It's not that they became rich. It's not that everything is resolved. But the decisions are different. Internal conversations have changed. The way of reacting to money is no longer the same. Before, they saw themselves as someone who always struggles to pay bills. Now, they begin to see themselves as someone who is under construction. This identity change is subtle but powerful, because people always act according to who they believe they are. Kiyosaki explains that no one builds wealth trying to be someone they don't believe they are. When identity changes, behavior follows. Saving money stops being sacrifice. Studying finances stops being an obligation. Investing stops being fear. During these 30 days, the person begins to respect themselves financially. They stop sabotaging their own future with impulsive decisions, not by external force, but because now there is awareness. This new identity creates an internal limit. Certain choices simply stop making sense, and when this happens, growth no longer depends on constant effort. It depends on consistency. One of the greatest learnings of these 30 days is understanding the value of time. Before, time was something that simply passed. The person exchanged hours for money and spent the money trying to relieve the tiredness caused by those hours. With the new mentality, time gains another weight. Each financial decision begins to carry a silent question. Does this respect my time or waste it? Kiyosaki teaches that poor people sell time to survive. Rich people use time to build systems. When someone begins to respect their own time, they automatically begin to respect the money that came from that time. During this process, the person stops making hasty decisions. They understand that financial growth doesn't happen at the speed of anxiety, but at the speed of consistency. Small, repeated actions protect the future from major mistakes. This respect for time changes everything. Haste decreases, comparison loses strength, focus increases. And little by little, financial life begins to move towards something more solid. Because those who learn to value time inevitably learn to build wealth. At the end of these 30 days, the greatest change isn't in the bank account. It's in the way of thinking, deciding, and seeing one's own future. The person understands that there is no financial miracle. There is direction, there is awareness, there is discipline applied in silence every day. They realize it's not about how much money passes through their hands, but about how much control exists over each choice. Money stops being a constant problem and becomes a tool that can be used intelligently. Robert Kiyosaki teaches something simple but powerful. Those who change habits for 30 days change the course of their own life. Because small decisions, when repeated, build large results. If this message spoke to you, leave your like now. This helps this content reach more people who also need to hear this. And subscribe to the channel to continue learning about money, mentality, and financial freedom. Now the question remains, if you could change just one habit today, which one could change your entire life tomorrow? See you in the next video.